Alright guys, so it's Saturday. I swung by the shop to just play carburetor bingo, see how this Pro Foam works out. And then, so I'm going to be taking off the Edelbrock and see how that works out. Because this carburetor does work pretty good. We had it on that big block on the stand. I'm going to reset a couple things. And then, but before I do that, I think I'm going to play with the timing curve a little bit and see how it goes. So I'm going to see if that makes any changes, and then after that we'll try the carburetor out. So I'm going to follow it up, see how this works. Of course, this is our vulnerable yet trusty Edelbrock 1405. I swear by them for most near stock mild SBOs. It's the perfect carburetor. This one's pretty much like almost 13-14 years old. It's been on various different engines and it's been loaned out various different times. It's always worked out. Alright, so as you guys have heard me say, I'm changing the curves. So you got these weights, and when your centrifugal advance moves, this is what changes the rate of ramp for your timing curve. So the softer the springs, the faster it's going to snap open. Right now I have a heavy spring and a medium spring. I had a heavy and a light. I may put another medium spring in there and it should be pretty happy. It definitely stiffened up. It was very loose. So I'm going to see how that works out. But this is pretty much what you're doing, and it's to tailor how much timing the car wants upon acceleration. That really has an effect on how the engine will run off the line. Pretty significant. So on most performance applications, 2 medium springs work really well. So I'll let you guys go and follow it up, see how this works. Alright, what a huge improvement from changing that super fast advance, which I think that one light spring allowed the advance to come in really fast even with a heavy spring. So I got a heavy spring and a medium spring, and since this is a heavier car and it's going to hold back the engine a little bit, it really likes that slower ramp up in the timing curve. What a world of difference. This thing actually leaves the line and it feels crisp, whereas before it kind of labored for the RPM, which is what led me to believe that with the new gear combo and everything, this thing really wants to move, but the weight of the car is working against it and holding back the RPM as it's fighting against that weight, all that mass to push through. So I had, you know, the engine wants to go, but it's like having it tied to a tree stump. It's not going to move much. So that timing curve change really changed it. So now I'm going to try the carburetor and we'll go from there. So big improvement with just that simple spring swap. Alright, I got it on there. I had to eliminate a couple things until I finalized what I'm going to do, like adding my fuel filter back in line. But this carburetor runs really well. The exhaust note doesn't smell too rich. It took a little bit of doing to adjust the idle just right. Right now I think I'm idling at about 850. I think my tach might be a little off, but the RPM drop isn't horrible. I mean, looking at the tach right now, we're at about 900. You know, we got a 200 RPM drop, which is pretty ideal, and that's in drive, and it's pretty stable, and it would hold drive for quite a while before it chokes out, because earlier with the setting I had, the engine wanted to die. After like 2 minutes of runtime, it was choking out because there was too much fuel at idle. But it's pretty good. This thing launches pretty good. It feels better. So for now, I'm just going to take it home, and eventually I'm going to put in my fuel filter and modify that whole line so that it will accept all of my old stuff, and my Edelbrock will go back to run stand usage. So the idle is a little high right now, but until I put the vacuum gauge on there, I really can't determine anything. And I also think it's because I have the vacuum advance hooked up where it's pulling at idle. I might change that to get this idle better, because the idle is really good as it is, and right now I'm getting all this extra timing that I don't need at idle, and it raises up the idle. So I'll let you guys go. We'll recap this in a little bit. Alright guys, as I'm shuffling through my garage, this is the recap of the 650 Pro Form on the Bonneville. Now, I did get it to run very good. The problem is, I think the jetting in this carburetor from the box is way too big. And what happens is when this engine is cold, it runs really good. You start getting over about 170 degrees, closer to 190. The idle starts to really suffer. So meaning that it's overly rich to where at cold idle it runs great. And then as the temperature comes up and ambiently, that fuel mixture becomes richer because the atmospheric temperature within the engine bay, the engine itself, has made the air thicker because, colder air is thinner, hotter air is thicker, or vice versa, I guess, depending on what ideology you want to use. But I believe that is the correct terminology to use here. Usually cold air is thinner, hot air is thicker. So as less air finds its way in, our mixture becomes richer. And without an AFR gauge, I truly am guessing here. But the dead giveaway is the fact that once this thing is really warmed up, it likes a lot less fuel. So I had the screws turned in almost to a half a turn, whereas on a cold start, this really likes about a turn and a half out on the idle mixture screws. And that's where most Holleys are going to be pretty good. That set out the box is about a turn and a half. So I think it's the jetting. Not only that, but I think the emulsion, the setup in there, the air bleeds that are there, this is more suited for a hot little small block. So this is a 650 double pumper, which is pretty much a quick fuel. It's a Proform 650. This is for something that's a little hotter. Now, I have had a bone stock 650 classic Holley double pumper on a 307 work flawlessly. And people don't believe me, but it worked out great, and that was literally box stock. This carburetor is really kind of too big for the engine here. And I think for testing purposes, like taking it to the track and using this carburetor, that's all we're going to use it for. We're going to test it between the Edelbrock and that, and if this is faster, then I'll dive more into it. If not, then we're going to just, run the Edelbrock, because the Edelbrock has worked out really good on the street all across the board for me in the past. And again, this engine, the fastest it ran with that same Edelbrock was a 13.7 in my 72. So I know that carburetor is enough for the motor. And I just wanted to try this out because, shit, I had it. And I think the initial shot of fuel really, really helped it. So all that extra fuel really, really did make it come to life. But I think that the jetting of the carburetor might be too much. So maybe I'll actually do a little bit more tuning on the Edelbrock and richen up the acceleration circuit on the Edelbrock. Whereas this one, I think it's too much carb. Now the only thing is it's hot and I don't feel like taking it off right now, but I might be exposing too much of the fuel transfer slot, which is, I mentioned before, when you set your fast idle, if you expose too much of that little slot, you get a ton of fuel and it becomes an issue when it gets hotter. And then it went from running perfect to it hits a certain atmospheric temperature and boom, it runs like shit. And that's kind of what happened here. I took it for a drive. I pulled off the highway there and I waited till there was no cars, and then I got on it, and man, this thing pulls like none other. I mean, this thing, for what it is, it's still fairly impressive. So I think there's a little bit more doing to do with it, but for the most part, it's working good. Just, I think it's a little too much on the jet. I think it's a little too much carb for the setup, and this is where you got to truly pick and choose what you're going to want for a carburetor. This is more suited for like a really, really hot 350, something with a bigger cam, bigger intake, a little bit more of everything than what's here. This is almost stock. All I have is a towing cam in this engine with an Edelbrock Performer. That's it. So, but overall, it did its job, especially off the line. I did a burnout. I shifted through the gears. It did its job at what I would call race temperature. My ideal temperature to hit the burnout box is about 130. Then usually by the time I'm staging, it's about 160. And on the return road, it's at about 180. And then usually, at least on my olds, I can get the car to cool down back to about 130 within 10 to 15 minutes, cycling the water pump and fans on. Every like 2-3 minutes, I'll run them for like a minute, shut them off, run them again, on and off, on and off, on and off until the car cools off. So either way, that's the overall recap. Overall, not bad. Needs more fine tuning, and this is where it hurts to not have the AFR gauge because I am guessing here. This is a little bit of guessing because I don't have that number to, I don't have that AFR number to translate into where I really need it or what's really happening. Or is my idle AFR really degrading that bad once it gets hot, whereas a lot of people would think that's like a vacuum leak, but it might be an overly rich idle that once it gets warm, it might go from like a 12.8, which is okay, to like a 10.5, which is fat, really fat for an idle. So again, it comes down to when not having the AFR really makes it tricky. And this is kind of going back to basics. I got it close, really close. It's just once it gets really warm up to like running temp 190 is where you start to see some of the idle quality go away. So I'm really leaning towards this carburetor is fat. But all the other circuits off the line, there's no bogs, no nothing like that. It works flawlessly. It's just a running temp deal. And I think it's just too much fuel. So either way, I'll let you guys go. Share, like, subscribe. I hope I didn't bore you. This was just a little something different to work on today. I had it. It cost me nothing. And ultimately, we're going to try it at the track. I am going to put the Edelbrock back on there to look at our idle mixture throttle thingy like I told you guys. And that's for later. Tomorrow, I got to go over that car. So share, like, subscribe. Follow me on Instagram as Copper Cutlass. See you.